call. Honourable Rick Barker.
Mr Speaker, I am rise to support on the Arms Military-Style Semi-Automatic Firearms and Import Controls Amendment Bill, and to note that this is another piece of legislation on firearms, which has some positives and it has some negatives. The difficulty we have with firearms is that there are two distinct groups of people in New Zealand. Those who are very, very supportive of firearms and write emails and tell us that there is a right to bear arms. Well, that may be so in America with the amendment to the Constitution, which some people have doubts about the extent of which it is a right to bear arms, but there is the Constitution is what people believe it to be, and people in the US believe they have a right to bear arms. In New Zealand, we do not have a written Constitution, nor do we have an amendment which says that the members of the public have a right to bear arms. Carrying a weapon is a privilege, and it's a licence privilege. And I'm a member of the public who has a licence to carry a firearm. I've owned a firearm for a long time. The first firearm I got was a Lee Enfield Mark IV bolt action with a 10-shot magazine, which I got at the age of 18. I went to the local sports shop, said I wanted to buy one to go deer shooting, and I was told by the sports shop owner that I had to go to see the sergeant who was in charge of firearms at the Greymouth police station, present him with the firearm so he could record the number of it and my name and address, which I did. When I came back and told the shopkeeper that I had done that, he completed the sale and I had a firearm. I was registered and the firearm was registered. This is the way it was when I was a young man. But then the police decided that it was all too complicated, and we changed the law, and we then licensed firearm owners, not the weapons. So today we have a disjoint between the firearm owner, the person who's licensed to carry a firearm, and the number of firearms that they have. But firearm owners do have to have a different sort of registration. I'm not licensed to have a pistol. I'd have no desire to have a pistol, but I'm not licensed for it. And I'm not a gun collector, so I'm not licensed for that. The conditions vary. There is still disquiet in the community about the number of firearms in the community which are unidentified for good reason. But this Parliament has failed to resolve that broader and bigger issue. Gun owners are very concerned that if there was a registration of firearms and a registration of owners, like the old system was, then this would be a short step away from the state deciding to take off them their firearms. This is a view which is widely held, and one which I do not personally share. But I have to acknowledge it is a view that people have. The gun-owning community are very suspicious of this place, Parliament, and just as many of them are very suspicious with the intent of this bill. But it's fair to say that the nature of firearms in this community and the use of them has changed. As a young person, nearly every house I knew had a firearm. People were either ex-services, country folk, country people who went and shot pests, shot deer, shot goats and did those things. It was just an ordinary everyday event that people had them for dealing with problems around the local area. Possums and so on. Slug guns in those days were .177, pump action, and if someone accidentally shot you with one, it didn't break the skin. You're lucky if you got a bruise. But this is not the case today. Slug guns today are of larger calibre, .22. Their pumping mechanisms are much more powerful. They are gas operated and they have multiple shot magazines. They are today a very lethal weapon and are completely different from the slug gun that was available when I was a young man. The law has to recognise these changes, and we'd be kidding ourselves if we did not. But the issues are quite often misunderstood. And part of the misunderstanding of this is the definition of a military-style semi-automatic firearm. This bill starts its journey because of a court decision over the way in which the law described a military-style semi-automatic firearm. It's whether that was, in defining it in a rather negative way, led to the police being unable to successfully bring a prosecution about a particular MSA weapon. Therefore, Parliament is back to redraw the line again. I'm going to suggest, Mr. Speaker, to the Select Committee that it's not going to be an easy matter for the Select Committee to hear simply on the paper. It's not going to be an easy matter for people to come and describe to us the various types of weapons there are, how in fact they're configured, what the use is, and what the capability is. I'm going to suggest, Mr. Speaker, to the Select Committee that it adjourn on a day or two and go to a rifle range. And there I think we should be shown by the police and those who are opponents of this bill exactly the nature of the weapons that they are concerned about and demonstrate their use. I'm also going to suggest to the Select Committee that the people who are submitters to the legislation would also be invited to attend the day or the days, and for them to demonstrate on the rifle range the nature of the weapons that they think should or should not be covered and the scope of the bill. I think we have to have a very clear and open demonstration of the nature of the weapons and the concerns people have about them. See, many people who in times gone by would have lived in households which would regularly have had firearms in them do not today. There are many households who have had no experience of firearms. There are many households and many people who are very nervous and apprehensive about firearms, and for good reason. A firearm is designed with one purpose and one purpose only: to deliver lethal force at range and remotely. They are designed to kill. That is the sole purpose of a firearm. And yes, they are used for sport. Yes, they are used for entertainment. But let's not misunderstand the fundamental nature of a firearm. A firearm is designed to deliver lethal force. And therefore, the public have justified concern about firearms, about their use, about their ownership, and the purposes that they can be put for. To put aside those public concerns, those genuine concerns, would make Parliament remiss in its obligations. But on the other side, Parliament does have to recognise that legitimate owners are entitled to enjoy their firearms. Legitimate owners are entitled to enjoy the sport and recreation of shooting, and that we have a wonderful outdoors here in New Zealand for deer stalking, goat hunting, tar shooting, duck shooting, you name it. It is a fabulous feature of New Zealand that we have a great outdoors, and this is made much more enjoyable for many people by the opportunity to use firearms and to hunt and to stalk. And I, for one, would be completely opposed to any restrictions on that activity. But we have to find a balance, and this bill is about trying to find a balance. And it does have to recognise that there are significant changes in the style of firearms, and one which has concerned people has been the style of weapons, particularly, in this case, air-powered rifles. I make the point again, Mr. Speaker, that when I was a young man, the only type of slug gun or air rifle you could get was a pump-action .177 slug gun. And they were as slow as wet weak. In fact, you could see the slug come out of the end of the barrel. They were that slow. And they dropped off, as some member says, like a stone off a bridge. They had no trajectory at all. They were hopeless at knocking over a sparrow. Let's face it, anything bigger than that, it was impossible to do any damage to. But the modern air rifle is completely different. The modern air rifle can have a much bigger calibre, gas-powered, and can deliver lethal force. Of that there is no doubt. The modern air rifle is not a single-shot pump. They are very often magazines with with 20 or 30 rounds in them, multiple rounds in them, and they are almost like a machine gun. So Parliament has to take note and has to change the law. But we need to do that in a considered way. And Labor welcomes this bill as an opportunity to again debate the issue of firearms, the nature of the firearms, and come to a considered decision. And in saying considered decision, Mr. Speaker, I do hope the Select Committee take up my suggestion of having the police and other interested parties come to a rifle range and show us exactly what the nature of the weapons they want to have restricted, what they want to have unrestricted, and so we can have a really informed view and a very good practical discussion, because at the end of that we will be all informed, and if we're better informed then we will make better law. Thank you.
Call Jonathan Young.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I'm pleased also to speak